Hey guys, welcome back to another lesson. Today is Wednesday, and this is one of your final lessons of fourth grade using wonders. How exciting! So let's talk a little bit today about your goal. So we're going to be focusing on asking and answering questions in a text. So your goal, you're going to be able to ask and answer questions about a text while you read. Now that means if you don't understand something, you're going to read it and you're going to stop. So, as you read something, if you don't understand it, you're going to stop and you're going to look for the answer. Now, sometimes that's going to involve having to reread. Now, think about difficult texts that we've read in the past. As we've read them, we've always stopped and asked some questions about the things that are happening. And today, that's what you and I are going to practice so we can become better readers. So we're going to hear a story this week about energy. Let's head to the story now so you can listen. And as you listen, I want you to see if you can stop, ask yourself a question about the text, and see if you can answer it there. Don't worry, because we are going to practice some together. So the story we're reading this week is called The Great Energy Debate. It is a narrative nonfiction, which means it's written based on actual events that have happened, true life things that could happen. So don't forget your essential question, and we're talking about energy resources and how they've changed throughout the years. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this week's text, The Great Energy Debate.
Our energy debate will be an incredible event, but I need to study. Our teacher won't tell us which side of the debate we'll be on until the day before it happens, which means we'll have to pre-plan arguments for both sides.
Now remember, a debate is where there are two sides that are going against each other, trying to determine maybe who's right or who's wrong. Sometimes that has to do with some group that might support something and a group that doesn't. They will have a debate to try to get people to sway to their side. Let's keep going.
Our energy debate will be an incredible event, but I need to study. Our teacher won't tell us which side of the debate we'll be on until the day before it happens, which means we'll have to pre-plan arguments for both sides. The debate will be next Tuesday and will include a discussion about different energy sources. Each team will have a microphone. One team will talk about the benefits of an energy source, and the other team will talk about its drawbacks. We'll have to learn about the environmental consequences related to each resource as well as the costs.
So here is exactly what I was just talking about. One team is going to talk about the benefits and the other team is going to talk about the drawbacks. Now, benefits and drawbacks are usually referred to as pros, which means the good things, and drawbacks is usually referred to as cons. Those would be those bad things. So they are going to have to talk about the pros and cons of energy source. Let's keep going.
We may be asked to debate the future of gasoline as an energy source. If so, I would say that gasoline is made from oil, a fossil fuel. According to geologists, fossil fuels formed over hundreds of millions of years from ancient plant and animal remains. But here's the problem. We use these fuels far faster than it takes them to form. Because fossil fuels are non-renewable resources, if we keep using them, eventually there will be none left. Plus, burning these fuels pollutes the air.
So let's pause really quickly. And based on the paragraph we just heard, are there any questions that you might be able to make from the text? Now, if you're able to make any questions from the text, you also want to make sure that you can answer those questions. So if I don't understand fossil fuels and why they're renewable, I may want to keep reading. I may want to ask a question and see if I can find it in the text. Let's keep going.
It is easy to be hypercritical of fossil fuels. However, most of our cars and factories use this type of fuel, and therefore changing everything would be a huge undertaking. What is energy? Energy is the ability to do work or make a change. It also is a source of power for making electricity or doing mechanical work. We use the wind, the sun, fossil fuels, and biofuels to produce energy. Burning coal produces heat energy that is converted into electrical energy. We use that energy to light our houses. Solar energy comes from the sun. Solar panels convert sunlight into electrical energy.
Now, here's a really great example where we can stop and talk about our essential question. Now, as we had talked about yesterday in our vocabulary, solar panels, that is something that has changed over time. We haven't always had solar panels where they convert sunlight into electrical energy for us to use in our homes. So that would be one way that things have changed over time. Now, also, if I'm not understanding exactly what energy is, I may want to go back and focus on one of our skills before, which would be to reread this section and maybe start to answer some of the things I didn't understand about energy, because that's a great paragraph that tells you exactly what energy is, and it also gives you some examples. So that's kind of what I'm talking about this week. When I'm having you ask yourself a question about maybe something that was difficult to read, you're going to have to reread the text to get a better understanding of what's happening. Let's keep going.
If we are asked to debate the use of wind energy, we would have to know that this is a renewable energy source. For example, unlike fossil fuels, wind will never run out. One large wind turbine could produce enough energy for a whole city. In addition, this method doesn't damage the environment. Turbines can be placed all over the world to capture wind energy. Then the energy from the turbines is converted into electrical energy. But there is a drawback. Wind may not be as efficient as other energy sources. Only about 30 or 40% of all wind energy is changed into electricity. It would be very expensive to have wind turbines installed all over the world. This debate is important for people in the United States. Our country makes up only about 5% of the entire world's population, yet we consume about 30% of the world's energy. It is not a coincidence that students are asked to take part in these debates. We will probably have to make these decisions when we are adults. The debate will be difficult, but I will be ready.
Now, let's stop here. And it does say that the narrator, he or she says, I will be ready. Now, here is how we're going to stop. You may be asking yourself, how do they know that they're going to be ready? That would be a question. How does the narrator know that they will be ready for these debates? Now, you can make an inference based on what we read. Who is the narrator? The narrator is the student. The student's going to be ready because he or she has prepared for this debate. So that's a question you could ask yourself. If you're not understanding why the narrator is saying they're going to be ready, you could go back and reread and hopefully understand that, oh yes, they're going to be ready because they were part of this debate. They got to hear the pros and they got to hear the cons because their teacher assigned that assignment to them. Let's take a look at our presentation that I pulled up at the beginning, because we're going to also practice an example so you can see exactly what we'll be doing. Now here's an example on the screen of what we just practiced. The question you may have asked yourself at the beginning of the text is, why does the narrator say that students had to pre-plan arguments for both sides? Because the narrator does say that. He or she does say that all of the students, they didn't know which side they were going to be on, so they had to plan to be on both sides. They had to figure out the benefits and the drawbacks. Let's head back to the text and let's see what we can infer as to why the narrator says that they had to prepare for both sides. Let's take a look at the first paragraph, because this is where the narrator tells us that they have to pre-plan for the pros and the cons of the debate. It says, our energy debate will be an incredible event, but I need to study. Our teacher won't tell us which side of the debate we'll be on until the day before it happens, which means we'll have to pre-plan arguments for both sides. Now, as I read this, and as you read this, you may have asked yourself, why is the student saying they have to pre-plan the arguments for both sides? The text says the teacher wouldn't tell them which side of the issue the students were going to be debating for. So they didn't know if they were going to be on the pro side or the con side. Now, why would they have to pre-plan for both? Think about it. Now, you're right. They had to pre-plan, like we had mentioned, because they didn't know which side they were going to be on. Now, as you went down, you also learned the things that they were going to be included in the discussion for energy sources. And you also learned right here that one team is going to talk about the benefits and one team is going to talk about the drawbacks, which, like we mentioned, are the pros and the cons. So as you're reading things, you want to stop, ask yourself a question, just like we did about the pre-planning arguments. Well, why does the narrator say they have to pre-plan? And you and I both were able to decide that they had to pre-plan both arguments because they didn't know which side of the debate they were going to be on. So let's head back to our graphic organizer and let's put the answer into that question. So this is just that question that we're putting down on maybe a sheet of paper that you have as you read, things like that, why the author is saying that the students had to pre-plan arguments for both sides. And you and I know they had to pre-plan because they didn't know which team they would be on. Okay, so they didn't know if they were going to be on the team that supported or the team that didn't support. So they didn't know if they were going to have to talk about the pros or the cons of energy. Okay, so this ask and answer question usually takes place in your brain as you read. We don't typically have you write down those questions and then answer them, but for this purpose, we are. Okay, so I want you to be aware that this strategy is going to really be more for when you are reading something and maybe you don't understand it. You're going to want to stop and ask those questions. Sorry guys, I'm just fixing this because I realized that examples was spelled wrong and that's never good. So let's just fix that really quickly. All right, there we go. Much better. Okay, so like I mentioned, we don't typically have you write them down, but for this one, we did. Now, you're also, when you practice, you're going to be writing the answers down to the questions that you create. So here is going to be where you're going to practice your turn. Your last one of your last assignments in 4th grade using Wonders is going to be to ask and answer questions in a Google Classroom doc. Let me show you what that looks like right now. So here's the assignment that you're going to be working on to practice the ask and answer question comprehension strategy. You're going to want to reread the Great Energy Debate, and you're going to be able to reread it by clicking on this link, and then the story is going to pop up. You are going to think of 3 questions as you read the text. Hopefully they're difficult questions, but they also want to be questions that can be answered from the text. So once you have your questions, you're going to put the questions in here, 3 of them, and then you are going to put the answers in this column. So make sure when you do create your questions that they do come from the text, so that way you have your answers. All right, so you may head over right now to Google Classroom, find the assignment that's labeled Unit 6, Week 3, Ask and Answer Questions. Don't forget to hit the turn in button when you are done. And I will talk to you tomorrow with one of your last lessons of 4th grade.